This webinar is sponsored by Flash. As the industry's only true cloud-born solution, Flash's products are designed to be adaptable, respond to measurement, and to set you up for success in markets today and tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Eamon. Really glad that, again, thank you NPA and Flash for making this session happen. It's been a while, I missed everybody. Super glad we could do this session today. First off, a quick introduction of our panelists. I'm the CEO of Smarking. We're a technology company based in San Francisco, supporting more than 2,500 parking facilities across North America with our enterprise software solutions. We're very lucky to assemble a world-class panel today. We have Dan Roarty, President and COO from Arrive and Flash. Dan has tremendous experience, not only in the mobility world, but also in the e-commerce and travel world before he joined Arrive. I remember, to my memory, Dan was the EVP at Groupon, and then also had tremendous experience with companies like Orbitz and so on. We also have Jeff Eckerling, Chief Growth Officer at SP Plus. Jeff is overseeing their strategy, marketing, consumer facilities, and client technologies at SP Plus. Before SP Plus, Jeff was also a veteran in the startup world as well as technology world. Actually shared experience at Orbitz with Dan years ago. We also have Jeff Chang, CTO of Towne Park. Jack oversees all the technology perspectives at Towne Park and is on the initiative of transforming a conventional parking company to a technology company, plus parking services. And before Towne Park, Jack was the CTO of a multi-billion-dollar transportation technology company based in France, I believe. Did I miss anything, panelists? Introduction good? All right. Okay. Thank you all panelists for making this happen. So today's topic we have is really to get insights from all of our panelists in terms of where the market is today. What is their view on, because of the pandemic, what happened, what changed in the consumer and the demand side, and what does that mean when it comes to the forecast and the future of the market? And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask for recommendations from all panelists in terms of what we should be paying attention to in coming days when it comes to optimizing and operating parking businesses. After the panel questions, we'll have an opportunity to open the floor to the audience for any questions anyone may have. So throughout the session, please feel free to type in the question in the chat box on your GoToWebinar user interface. With that, we'll jump right in. First, let's take a quick look at where the market is from a data standpoint. As I mentioned, Smarking works with thousands of parking facilities and gathers real-time information. So far, up to June 7th this year, what we're seeing is U.S. off-street parking demands in terms of transactions quarter to date in Q2 were compared to 2019. We're actually close to slightly more than 70% recovered from an activity standpoint across the board. Now we have a data pool of about 1,000 parking facilities across North America, and this is both transient and contract parking or monthly parking added up. Compared to that, on-street parking is now more than 3/4 recovered, so we're only down 24%. If we wanted to take a quick look from a historical standpoint, a lot of us may remember throughout, this is, as I mentioned, when it comes to North America, off-street parking for garages and service lot for both monthly and transient parking on a monthly basis throughout 2020, aggregated data from more than 1,000 parking sites. As we all may remember, before the pandemic hit, business was good. Let's take a look at transactions here. Year over year, it was up. When pandemic hit, the entire industry touched the valley point in April. We had good recovery back in Q3. October was the peak. But then the second wave was very real, and we exited the year with more than 50% down across the industry from an activity or transaction standpoint. It was a rough year for all of us. Good news is, though, if we take a look at year to date, this year, give it 1 second. What we're seeing here, folks, is that back in January and February, seems like it was slow recovery, but now upcoming to all the way to May, across the board, looks like the market is roughly 74 or 75% recovered, and June is even better. So the signal is great. So this is what we're seeing from across the board from a data standpoint in terms of where the market is. Now, beyond the general North America market dynamics, we do have the opportunity to look at it into different regions. I'll just quickly show it up here with one view for everybody here, just so that we can get a quick grasp for different markets, how it's looking like from Smarking's perspective. If we take a look at 2021 Q2, quarter to date, off-street parking transactions compared to 2019, again, aggregated monthly and transient parking. Some of the good markets in terms of recovery, faster markets in terms of recovery is Miami. They're only down 14%, 85 or 86% up. Houston is doing well. As we all may remember, months ago, they were the first to open up the entire state. Seems like so far from a parking volume standpoint, they're doing pretty well. Boston is at down 27%. New York somehow is doing worse off than last year, to my memory. Not sure what's going on there, but DC is a little bit slow. Chicago is on par with the national kind of sort of trend. Nashville is a little bit slow. On the West Coast, Northern California is slightly better than Los Angeles area. Colorado is down 38%. So this is roughly what we're seeing in different regions from Smarking's perspective. Now, the first panel question comes in as, does this match what everybody is seeing here from your perspective? And I'm going to feed the question to Dan and Jeff and Jack, and then we'll reverse the order for the next question. So Dan, please, is this what you're seeing as well? What are the latest market trend that you're observing from your end?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back together again. Our observations, I think, are a little bit different. So similar overall, similar in aggregate. We're seeing kind of the same thing in aggregate. I think our market level observations are a little different. And so if you think from Arrive's perspective, a lot of our business is pre-sold parking passes, via our ParkWiz channels and other channels. And that in cities like New York City, we're actually very, very close to being fully back to where we were in January, February of 2020, and we're actually surpassing 2019 levels on a seasonal basis. And I think part of the difference there is in cities like New York that were historically transit-oriented markets, you have a lot of new people who historically haven't driven before. So they're going to show up on our doorstep. They're going to go to Google and search for, how to park in Manhattan or where to park in Manhattan and things like that. And so from our perspective, the pre-sold business is recovering faster probably than a lot of the organic transient business. But similarly in southern markets, we've seen recovery much faster than northern markets. The West Coast is still pretty stalled everywhere. But I think there's those transit-oriented markets where we're going to see a quicker pickup in business than Jeff might see on the ground day in and day out in SP lots.
Yeah. So maybe when I'll chime in here first. Thanks for having me on the panel again. I think when I saw your overall trends, I mean, obviously we've been doing a lot of the same analysis that you're looking at, comparing versus 2019. I think for this subset of locations that we've been actively tracking this whole time versus both 2020 and then versus 2019, I'd say overall the trends are similar, but I would say our data is more closely aligned with exactly what Dan was saying. New York in particular is a market where Monday through Friday, in particular, with what I'd call commuter behavior, so morning entries, late afternoon, early evening exits, we're ahead of where we were in 2019. Nights and weekends are still lagging in New York City, but we're starting to see that pick up. And I think, why is this happening? I mean, to Dan's point, you have a heavy mass transit commuter market in New York. It only takes a small percentage of people driving to start to have an impact on parking facilities and parking revenue. The data that doesn't align with what you see in New York is we've been tracking very closely the Castle Systems data, which many of you are aware of, which tracks building entries. And these most of the markets that you're showing, I mean, they're at somewhere between 20 and 30% building occupancy right now, right? So they're down significantly. I think another area, a market that you had down that was over 40%, below 2019, like Nashville. And it may also have to do with kind of where our locations are in a market like that. But that's a market where obviously things have opened up and opened up earlier on, and the entertainment areas in particular, we're seeing really, really strong revenue performance. And I think the other thing that I would say that aligns with kind of what Dan was talking about is as we think about our own B2C platform and parking.com, we've seen really, really strong growth in a lot of these markets, around reservations. And I think as events start to come back, and we're all seeing things start to get scheduled for the summer and into the fall, I think that will only give us good wind at our backs. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Jeff. Jack?
Yeah, I'll jump in. First of all, thanks for having me here, and really nice to be here and see everybody, although virtually. Just regarding the market trend, really, as you guys know, Towne Park, we serve three major markets: hospitality, healthcare, and residential. And I think the numbers we're seeing are more or less consistent with what when you had presented a little bit earlier. And we work with Arrive and aggregators to drive some of our airport traffic. But in general, though, I think that we see very strong healthcare market. The numbers there are certainly are performing quite well. On the hospitality side, the hotel sector has been devastated by the pandemic, as you guys all know. So the road to recovery has been relatively choppy, and we're also seeing the demand really is a function of in the market, and also the time of the day of the week. For instance, some of the hotels, we see a surge in traffic during the weekends, and on weekdays, the traffic is relatively light. So we're working closely with our hotel partners to see how we can get a better handle forecasting the demand and being able to take advantage of the ups and downs. But overall, I think we're optimistic about the recovery. We think that the industry is well on track to recover both on-street parking and off-street parking. And we also see a surge in airport parking as well. I think that's something that on the e-commerce side, which is an emerging market for Towne Park, we also see a very promising result from that perspective. So I think overall, I think it's the market is, I think it's moving in the right direction, but I think it also has some challenges in terms of how we manage our labor. And so you have demand, the ups and downs in demand, I think also calls for a very flexible staffing model. And I think that's some of the challenges that we've seen. Overall, I think those are very exciting.
Yeah. Jack, one thing I would add, and I think that's been interesting, and I'm sure you've seen similar trends in the hospitality sector that we both operate in. One of the things that has happened as a result of the pandemic is the drive-in ratio. So in other words, people driving and parking at a hotel relative to the number of rooms occupied, that ratio has skyrocketed, right? We're seeing huge drive-in ratios. So when the hotels do fill up on the weekends, it's a lot more cars, a lot more
Yeah.
common. And
Yeah,
you know, rideshare is, you know, less common right now, and that's been a positive in the hospitality sector.
yeah, that's a very good point. Although in some markets we're starting to see impact from the recovery of ride sharing. So you know, so it's interesting. You know, it's what I'm saying here is that, you know, the market is still very dynamic. And
yeah, it's definitely going to be a wild ride for many months, right? You know, the Uber and Lyft are trying to get their labor force back into play. Their rates are skyrocketing. It's really a day by day decision for travelers, for commuters, to kind of decide what to do as the policies and everything in their towns change, right? Every day here in Chicago, it's a new adventure. And, you know, do I wear my mask? Do I not wear my mask? Can I go into the office? Can I not go into the office? So I think that'll sort itself out. I do think some of the persistent trends that will stick, though, will be a wider range of variability in people's commute patterns. I think we will see a sustained level of interest in entertainment-related activities, just as people want to get out, they want to be around people, they want to see things and so forth as we get later. And you know, one canary in the coal mine for us is Ticketmaster. We're partnered with Ticketmaster, as well as many venues for their pre-sale. And so we get to see all of their on sales, and the demand for tickets has never been higher. The demand for venue space has never been higher. And according to some of our contacts, folks like Madison Square Garden and other venues, they're fully booked. So what they might used to, maybe they used to run 200 nights a year. They're going to be running 320 nights a year with events packed. And we can start to see that volume building because people are pre-buying their parking with their show tickets and their game tickets and things. And we're starting to see that volume build, really starting in about August. I think when we get to August, you'll see a large reemergence of kind of the entertainment nights and weekend style activities. You know, summer is anyone's game. I think people are taking vacations and they're doing drive trips and things like that. But I think when you get to the fall, I think you'll see commutes start to return, but differently shaped, maybe not all spiking at 8 a.m., maybe more spread out. I think you'll start to see entertainment related parking spike really high. And then I think the drive trip market in hospitality is here to stay for a while.
I agree with that, Dan. And you know, another interesting fact that came out, I think about a week or two ago, getting to events. I mean, 30 of the 32 NFL teams have said they're going to have full stadiums next year. So, I mean, that's already been announced. So, in terms of the fall, that has a big impact.
This is amazing discussion, amazing insights. Thank you all so much, panelists. So it sounds like, although from a data standpoint, it has been a roller coaster. We're seeing the trend coming up, but some other major trends, as our panelists shared here, is on one hand, there is a real shift from public transit to drive-in park. On the other hand, it sounds like the recovery of consumer activities, then workforce returning, is more of a trend as of right now. And anticipation, it sounds like in the fall, the workforce may return a lot more. And it also sounds like from a hospitality standpoint, recovery is happening. There's pent-up demand for events, for people to have fun, to go out. This is amazing. And now we're piecing together what's really happening in the entire parking world. Thanks to all the panelists here for sharing the insights. Now, with all of the latest kind of sort of the observation we're looking at on the market, another very important thing that we all know is because of this whole pandemic, the consumer behaviors have changed and shifted significantly. So the event sponsor, Flash Parking here, shared a set of data from their survey that I'm just going to quickly go through. And then the question to all panelists is, are you seeing and feeling the same, kind of anticipating the same consumer behavior changes? And are there anything that we're missing here? And with this, what is your anticipation when it comes to the next 6 to 18 months? When it comes to how you anticipate the consumers to behave, what kind of preparations the business should be paying attention to, and what does this all mean to the next stage of the recovery and then market dynamics? So some of the data that we've got from Flash is 74% of Americans use their phone to pay for food and merchandise at least once a week these days. 1 in 4 use their phone for food purchases. 86% agreed, I wanted to utilize technology to make my life easier, and 600% increasing active transit mobile app users as of April 2020 in the past 12 months, from April to April. Beyond that, we've also got information from Flash saying that that for people switch from transit to driving, there is an increase of driving for 26%, decrease for transit for about 60%, and 69% of people willing to pay more for parking services if guaranteed enhanced experience. People want better experience. 97% agreed that an app would drive me to parking at a location more frequently. Anticipated to use mobile applications to facilitate parking experience. 86% more likely to choose a parking location that has an add-on service like food, auto services, or micromobility. These are all good information sponsored by the event sponsor Flash. And now with this context, with all the latest observation from our panelists, next question comes as, for the next 6 to 18 months, panelists, how do you see the market is going to develop based off the latest, based off the sort of the shift of consumer behaviors? And this round we'll start with Jack.
Sure. I think what we're seeing is very consistent with the data you show from Flash. I think that consumers are more reliant than ever on technology to make their everyday life a little bit easier. It's pre-pandemic. I think that the key element consumers are looking for is a high touch experience, right? They wanted exceptional high touch experience. And now I think the consumers are expecting a safe, contactless experience. However, they also want exceptional service, right? So there's a gap. So how do you bridge that gap? And I think that technology is playing a key role in bridging that gap, right? Whether it's use of mobile apps or other contactless innovations in parking. And I think it's interesting that you pointed out that more and more consumers or the modern parkers are looking for services beyond just parking, right? So I think in the previous slide, I think in the Flash data shows consumers are interested to use the same technology for food delivery or add-on services. And so I think that this is consistent with what we're seeing, being able to leverage parking sort of as a baseline platform and be able to launch additional digital services on top of the parking platform, whether it's parking or it's mobility or additional services that related to automobiles or to transportation from one location to another, or leveraging the same platform to order additional services beyond the traditional parking services. So we're seeing a lot of that in the marketplace, whether it's hospitality or healthcare or high-end residential market. So I do think that there's a major shift in consumer expectation. I think the pandemic, it accelerated a lot of the innovations that we were seeing in the marketplace. I think the consumers are becoming smarter. They demand more. And I think that technology is going to play a key role in trying to bridge that gap. And I think that and also that coupled with what I call the hybrid work model, when some folks are returning to office, but perhaps not on a permanent basis or a couple of days a week kind of a thing, and then there's other folks who will be more or less working remotely for the most part. So you have a hybrid workforce, some locals, some are not, some permanent, some are kind of transient. I think that's going to create some very interesting problems in terms of how that's going to shape parking. Yeah, but more importantly, I think it's additional services that I think would supplement parking. So that's really what we see the market trends for the modern parkers.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate the insights here. Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things. I mean, from a consumer standpoint, I mean, I think we saw this even pre-pandemic. There was a huge desire from consumers to improve, the parking experience, and we recognize this, and we set out to really build out our own set of technology capabilities, and we launched the brand Sphere last year around a lot of these capabilities that create a more touchless and frictionless experience across many different markets that we operate in, whether it's a surface lot to a commercial office building, residential venues, airports, etc. And I think the desire for consumers as well as us to improve that user experience is a huge part of the focus. And I think we're only going to see more digital adoption and more of these transactions occurring on a phone. And the other kind of data point that I would just throw out there, and I think of my own personal experience going to a Cubs game the other week. You go to a lot of venues, they're cashless right now, right? Wrigley Field, you can't pay with cash. You go to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and 100% cashless. So you're only going to see more and more of these trends of businesses going cashless. And of course, there are some parts of the country where there's mandates that you have to accept cash, but I think you're going to see more and more kind of cashless operations. I think another area that I kind of think about as it relates to really call it the next 6 to 18 months is what's consumer demand going to look like, right? And I mean, I think to Jack's point, we see people returning to an office, but I think a large percentage of employees are not going to be that 5-day-a-week office commuter. And so what are the other types of products that you need? The way that we're thinking about the mix at a facility of monthly parking versus transient, that's changed. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting changes. I think back a couple of years ago at some of the NPA conferences, we were talking about the challenges around congestion. And for most of this pandemic, up until recently, there wasn't much congestion. But I think as these mass transit commuters begin to return to the office and return to the office by vehicle, there will be a time where some of them will probably say, you know what, I don't want to sit in this traffic anymore. I'm comfortable going back on a train, a bus, and they're going to go back to that. But I think for some period of time, there's going to continue to be this hesitancy by a lot of folks of going on mass transit, which is good for our industry. And how long that will continue, I'm not sure what the crystal ball shows, but those are just a couple trends that I think about and others at SP Plus do.
Amazing insights. Thank you, Jeff. Dan?
Yeah, I'll double click on Jeff and Jack's comments about kind of the digitization of the transaction itself, right? We spent a lot of time early on in the pandemic kind of shifting our focus to really supporting and enabling that expectation that people want a touchless transaction, whether they make a reservation or whether they just show up at the parking lot and want to pay with their mobile phone. And so we spent a lot of time with Apple Pay and Google Pay and other partners to really make sure we could bring easy to execute products to market. And now we have the benefit of many months of execution in the field and many hundreds, thousands of parking lots now with this capability. And what we've learned is a couple things. One is customers definitely want it. So from the first day that we hang a sign that says, scan here to pay with your mobile phone, we almost instantly see 10, 15, 20% adoption of customers. And it's clear that if you make the choice easy and apparent and in front of them, people will gravitate towards it. They seek it out. The second part is it is a learned behavior over time as well. So if you look at the lots that we launched the longest time ago, some that are now have been active for 7-8 months, the penetration or the shift from cash and credit to mobile phone payments continues to increase over time. We now have lots that are 60-70% mobile payments. And we're now able to observe those customers over many sessions, and the mobile payment behavior sticks. Kind of once you do it, you don't go back, right? Like once you took Uber, you didn't take a taxi anymore. Once you start paying with Apple Pay at the grocery store, you don't go back to taking your wallet out anymore. And that behavior is I think very true in this business. Now, what we don't have in this industry yet is a universal experience, right? So Jeff's execution of parking.com is a little different than our execution, and it's different than what Jack's working on and so forth. But that'll improve over time. We'll all start normalizing around, look here, it says pay here, here's a QR code. I know that means that I can pay with my phone, off I go. That's actually another learning that we had is we initially launched our solution to have both QR code and NFC tappable tags on them. And guess what? The restaurants did such a good job of training people to scan for menus that nobody even bothers with the NFC tags anymore. People like this idea that I don't need to approach this thing to engage with it. I can be in my car and scan through the windshield, or I can stand 6 feet away while there's a long line at the pay on foot station and capture that payment session while I'm there at a distance. And people really have really engaged in that. So all of these learnings, I think, are kind of starting to help us as an industry guide towards what are those common ways to do that and get consumers comfortable with that sort of stuff. And then the next journey, I think that's the stuff that's going to happen in the next 6 months. I think we'll continue to see that rapid adoption. As you start to get into the 18-month time window, I think that's where you'll start finally to see some very interesting things happen within vehicle systems, with integrations and mapping software. You'll start to finally see this idea of parking and charging coming together as a thing. The number of EV vehicles on the road are going to rise rapidly. So we as an industry will face a new challenge, which is how do we help consumers understand where the chargers are, that they're available, that they're not occupied, that I can use them, what it costs. That's a whole new wave of challenges we'll have to tackle together. And so I think in 18 months, I think you're going to see that. So the good news is with digitizing transactions is we many times are able to convert an anonymous person into a person we can now talk to, because when they pay with their mobile phone, oftentimes we capture an email address or a phone number, something that we can use to talk to them about whatever comes next. And so I'm sure that's a big focus for everyone on this call is how do we continue to open up channels to speak to customers so that as we do create new services, innovations, that we have ways to tell customers about them and bring them into our lots and help differentiate the products on the ground.
Yeah, I just want to quickly comment, because both Jeff and Dan talked about cashless and digital transactions. One of the interesting technologies that we have recently rolled out is digital tipping. This is a way for the hotel guests to contactlessly tip our valet by simply scanning a QR code, and then the tip will go straight to the valet's digital wallet. So this could be implemented as a digital tipping pool, or it could be customized for individual locations. So I just want to share that as a way that we're using technology to simplify the experience. There's no physical cash changing hands, so it's safe, contactless. At the same time, it does not cannibalize the traditional cash tipping. And then we're leveraging technologies from our partners like Flash to using the SMS-based retrieval, vehicle retrieval to have that capability. So I thought, I think it's, to me, I think it's for the users to pay for parking is one very good way to use this technology, but there's also other applications of the same technology to enhance our associate income and and improving retention. I just want to share that. It's an interesting technology that we have recently rolled out.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to add is interesting. I agree with what Dan was saying about QR codes. We rolled out, last spring, spring of 20, at a lot of our surface lots, mobile payments on parking.com, and we gave consumers choice of paying by zone, either in the mobile web or via the parking.com app, which is obviously the common way that consumers pay primarily on street if they're making a mobile payment. It's by putting in a zone. We also offered text, and we also offered QR code. And I think if you went back 2 years ago, so many consumers would have said, what's that code? What am I supposed to do? And do I need to have a special app to download that? And of course, cameras have improved so much that scanning the QR code and that the user experience is so much better. But I can tell you that it has been a pleasant surprise to see the penetration of QR code relative to the other two payment methods. And I think some of it is during this pandemic, consumers just got used to scanning QR codes.
These are really amazing. Go ahead, Dan. You had something to add, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, which so everything Jeff just said, which then of course creates new things we have to think about, like what happens if someone tries to add their own QR code on top of yours and try to steal a customer, and the security concerns and those sorts of things. But there's solutions to that too. So like every new situation unlocks a new opportunity, and that's QR codes are a great example where to help solve some of the trust and security problems, Apple went and built their own new style of QR called an app clip code. And so we'll keep innovating. We'll keep innovating with partners like Apple and Google, who drive the dominant operating systems for these phones. But it's a really exciting time. I think the pace of innovation is going to accelerate. Every new innovation will create some new problem we're going to have to solve, and then that's a new opportunity as well for new technology and for good people to solve these problems. So it's going to be an exciting journey as we move from where we are today. And I think the pandemic, for all the terribleness, it really accelerated a lot of things in this regard anyway. And not just in parking, in the food and restaurant industry, the travel industry, hospitality, healthcare. The things you can do with technology now that you couldn't before are amazing.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jack. This is amazing. Wow, I've learned a ton. I've been taking notes actually, because on one hand, it sounds like the keywords are really acceleration of technology and digitization. Because of this whole pandemic, a lot of things has happened. Some of the keywords: touchless, cashless, flexible when it comes to commuters, and when it comes to even the next level. People talk about concept. We saw certain proof cases before the pandemic of all of these. Now these are just basically expected facts. You have to have those solutions in place. Sounds like it's the case. And beyond that, not only there is a clear, even just from the numbers perspective, there's a clear adoption of all of these technologies. And as Dan said earlier, you build it, people will use it. Consumers are spoiled. They wanted their experience to continue to get better and better. And it's our job, I guess, to continue to spoil the consumers. So all of these exciting things are happening at a pace that has never been seen before. And when it comes to the next level of things that Jack pointed out, there's even like digital tipping tools. I would never think of that myself. And when it comes to the next level of security, how do you deal with the QR code overlays? This is just amazing. EV charging, all of these things are happening just so much faster. So thank you, panelists, for that. Now, with all of these, we have limited time, so let's combine the next two questions together. Say, we talked about what where the market is, what consumer behaviors how consumer behaviors have shifted, and naturally we come to the topic of technology. And then the natural question is, okay, how do we leverage, really based off what we talked about, how do we leverage technologies and data for post-pandemic growth? We're now in the post-pandemic growth mode. And what are some of the recommendations, panelists, you have for industry leaders, for your peers? What are the things people should be paying attention to? We'll combine these two questions, please. This time, yeah, Dan, please go ahead.
I'll kick off here. I think the first things first is in a time of rapid change like this, data is your best asset. You have to have rich data, and it's not enough to just pull some reports and once a month kind of look at them. You need everyday data. You need the ability to slice and dice it. You need to be to look at it. So, take my take two examples. One is commute patterns changing over time. But we know they're going to continue to shift for many, many months here. And so if you're looking at pricing, for example, in your space, how do you know if your early bird rate's relevant anymore? How do you know if you need to change it? How do you know if you should be looking at different rate structures? The only way you're going to do that is if you're watching these commute patterns, and you can start to analyze things like, maybe I should make my 3-hour rate a 4-hour rate, or vice versa. You have to do that with data, and you have to get that data from wherever you can get it, whether it's out of your park system, your enforcement systems, camera systems, whatever tools you have, and you got to get it quickly and make it fingertippy. And then same thing. Things, there's new types of data. So, for example, we have some technology now that allows us to start understanding the make and model of vehicles. That is going to become more important as you start monitoring electric vehicle traffic on your lots, right? If you're thinking about how do I make the investment case to install chargers or whatnot, you can't do that blindly. It's something that you need to do with the presence of data. You have to know what the how many EV cars are in your city, how many are driving on your lots, how long are they there? Are they there long enough for different types of charging scenarios, all that sort of stuff. And so data will be super critical. So to the extent whether you're working with partners, whether you have you've invested in your own data tools and data enterprise, that's going to be front and center to thriving in this economy. And if you don't create the data, I think you'll be left behind. You won't change pricing fast enough. You won't improve your product fast enough. And consumers, like you said, who want what they want, they're going to choose other parking lots.
Thank you, Dan. Jeff?
Yeah, no, I feel like Dan and I agree a lot on this type of stuff. But I think for us, it starts with data, and both transactional data as well as customer survey data, customer review data, and using that information to improve your operations, determining what products and features you need to build out. I think we have probably been spending more and more time making sure that we are acquiring this information so that we can make better decisions to ultimately generate more profits for our business, and we've been really focused on that. I mean, I think the other thing for our industry that I think everyone needs to be thinking about, and I was talking about it before, is just improving that customer experience and removing as much friction as possible from that parking experience, whether it's a valet at a hospital or a hotel or at an airport or a venue or a commercial office building. Figuring out how you can remove as much friction from that experience will, for many customers, that will be how you retain that parker and continuing to come back to your facility. So I think that's something else. And one of the things that we say oftentimes is you got to have a foot in the present and a foot in the future. And some of the things that Dan was talking about around electrification, and that's something we spend quite a bit of time now talking about with our clients and our teams, and preparing for the future, and how that becomes really important. We're going to see an uptick in EV vehicles on the road. It's still below 5%, but look at all the trends, whether it's General Motors or some of the other large auto companies. They're moving to electric fleets, and so these vehicles are going to need to be charged somewhere. And so, I think that's another big part of this. And I think the other thing I would just go back to as it relates to data and why it's so important, as we start to exit this pandemic, consumer habits are going to change, right? We were talking about that already. Consumer habits today look a lot different than they did in 2019, and in the beginning of 22, they may look a lot different than what they look like today. So having data to identify those trends is going to be really, really important.
Thank you, Jeff.
And
go ahead, please. Yeah.
I'll just quickly comment. I think I agree with everything Dan and Jeff just talked about. And we, at Town Park, we've embraced the data-centric vision, from the very beginning. And it's, it's not just analyzing the data from, the parking experience, the aggregators, the survey data, but it's also the data that would help us improve not only the guest experience, but also our employee experience. And I think the one thing that I mentioned early on in this webinar was the challenge in staffing because of the variability in demand, and also just the challenge in just hiring people in general. So I think both Jeff and Dan will probably agree with that. And so being able to deliver that experience for the guests, right, from arrival to departure, how do we use data to further improve that experience? And also for our employees, right, how do we position ourselves as an employer of choice in the gig economy? How do we use data to empower our employees so that they can become more productive and so that they can deliver the best possible experience for our guests? I think the parking industry has always been an industry where, it's been somewhat fragmented. There's a lack of, standardization. And so being able to pull together all these data from, different sources is a monumental task. I know Smarking has made some very significant advances as far as the parking equipment data. And but I think, there's still a lot more data that could be collected and to achieve that goal. And then, so to me is, once we have this data, how do you use the data to provide real-time insight? And there's two levels. One is, information or insights for our clients. One is for our internal consumption, right? So to me, there's kind of two levels of granularity of the data that we can present and add value for our internal operations, and also add value for our clients. So I think there's multiple ways to look at it, but I think going back to Jeff's point earlier, as far as recommendation for the industry peers, user experience is critical. And I think that, my final remark is that, user experience matters. And I just want to say that, it's not just for the guest, it's not just the end user, but it's also the employees. The employee, I think, experience is also just as important as the guest experience.
Amazing perspective. Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you all so much, panelists. So for this part, it sounds like on one hand, from the get-go, if not, you haven't done this yet, get together your data, start turning them into actionable insights, because consumer behavior has changed, and we need to understand what's really going on when it comes to making decisions on pricing, rate bands, even when it comes to staffing, how many people would bring back at what time, watch the numbers, and then make good decisions, because marketplace has changed. On the other hand, at the end of the day, it sounds like everything lands onto the experience when it comes to demand side. It matters. Make it easier for people to pay for your service. Plain is the thing we could say. Make it easier for people wanted to have your parking facilities, your services. Make it easier for them. And beyond that, clearly there is an employee perspective as well. It is hard to get talents. How can we make that really, really easier and better to leverage by leveraging technologies to make that part work a lot better is also important. This is amazing insights. Thank you all, panelists, so much. Now, as last part of the session, let's open the floor to the audience. Let's see if there are any questions. Eamon and Sarah, do we have any questions from the audience?
We have a couple of questions, Wen. We can jump into those. And of course, I do want to remind the audience that we have in our recording, the webinar. We'll make that recording available after the presentation. If you do want to put questions in, use the questions box that you'll find in the bottom right hand of the screen. I got a couple here I'll jump into. One from Matt Davis. he's asking about, are there any issues with security when the usage of mobile devices skyrockets?
I'll touch on that. I'll touch on that. So you know, any time a payment is involved anywhere, there's fraudsters that want to try to take advantage of that, and that whether that's a credit card sniffer, you know, sitting on the outside of your pay on foot machine, or someone putting their own QR code over your QR code to try to steal a transaction. That sort of stuff happens. You know, from our perspective, it's about monitoring very, very closely and predicting where you think fraud exists. And that's the same way, you know, in my past experiences in e-commerce, is you're not going to prevent all fraud, but you need to be very, very good at monitoring and quickly reacting to when signs of fraud exist. So in our case, for example, we know what the expected engagement rate is with every QR code is that we put out in the field, and every QR code is unique on every single sign. So if we deploy a parking lot with 10 signs and all of a sudden half the signs don't engage and don't have any more scans, then we know something's wrong. Either you know, a gang member came along and tagged the sign, or the sign fell down, or somebody's tried to steal the sign. And so we've built in monitoring to try to capture that and make sure we work with our operator partners to have a kind of an early warning, early alert system when that happens. So that's a key thing. The other thing is obviously the payment partners in the world, Apple Pay, Google Pay, the different payment networks, Visa, MasterCard, are also working on making payments more secure and harder to create fraud. So that's exactly why Apple came up with their version of a QR code, this app clip code. It's very, very hard to get certified to create an app clip code. Not anyone can come along and create one. You have to be a legitimate business. You have to go through Apple's process, Apple Pay's process, and be vetted and validated. So unlike a QR code that anybody can create for any purpose, these app clip codes have to go through a little bit more rigor. So I think part of this will be on us to solve operationally. Part of this will be on working with our payment industry partners to fix it. But I think the pure convenience and pure awesomeness of just waving your phone around in the air and taking care of everything is going to far outweigh the risks of fraud that I think will be very manageable and will be tackled well by everybody.
Yeah, Dan, I agree. I mean, I think one thing that this all goes back to is data, right? You got to have data. You got to be monitoring that data, and that can certainly help in mitigating and detecting fraud.
Yeah, and I think that this problem is not unique to the parking industry, right? I think that the pandemic has really accelerated, you know, a heightened alert to security. I mean, we've seen a marked increase in security threats since the start of the pandemic. So, you know, whether it's about you know, better security for mobile device-based payment, or how do we support a remote workforce? You know, I think security is absolutely a critical subject. But as Dan pointed out, luckily, you know, we have partners we work with on the payment side, you know, on the device side, and you know, the PCI industries, you know, has been very supportive of the evolution of this whole thing. So I do think that you know, we have to be diligent and you know, and just be, you know, staying on top of it. But you know, but I think this is just no different than any other businesses that deals with the mobile based payment.
Amazing. So security is going to be one part of the reality. Sounds like if we're trying to make consumer experience better, but as long as we're doing and as we follow best practice, making sure we're watching data and that is controlled, it's not that we can solve all the problems all overnight, but as long as that is the case, the benefits of mobile payment is clearly outweighing not doing anything, is kind of sort of what I'm gathering from the panel. Thank you guys. Even any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question here on connectivity. How is connectivity being addressed in the implementation of pay by phone, i.e. if there's no cell phone reception in an underground garage or in surface dead zones?
Yeah, I mean, this has been something, you know, we've had to tackle as it relates to you know, our on-demand gated solution that we've been implementing. You know, you may need to put in cell repeaters. There are things that you can do to address that, but obviously we all are very familiar with a lot of subterranean garages that have, you know, cellular or just connectivity challenges. And, you know, it's incumbent upon us and our clients to put in the right technology to help solve that, because ultimately it goes back to that customer experience. And I mean, probably all of us have been, you know, had an experience where you don't have cell coverage in a parking garage, right?
Yeah, there's many solutions. I think when you have a group of users that are known to you, either because they're your monthly users, they're in your loyalty club, they're, you know, the tenants in your buildings and those sorts of things. For those sites of constituents, there's many solutions, right? You can have apps that work even if they don't have connectivity. You can have ways to trust but verify, you know, kind of transactions and patterns that allow you to serve those people even if you have low or no connectivity. Where you really struggle are those random drive-up people that, you know, they don't have your app, they don't have one of your partner's apps, you know, they don't have other technology available to them. And that's where, you know, as Jeff said, kind of depending on the mix of your facility and who you serve, you may need to make that investment in cell phone repeaters. And again, back to we're not alone in this fight. The networks, Verizon and others, desperately also want to help solve this problem. And so, you know, it doesn't take but a phone call to them to start discovering what the solutions are and how cost effective they might be and so forth, to solve that problem. And it will back to earlier threads, it'll become even more critical when we start bringing in other services, EV charging and other things like that. Connectivity is a must when you do that. People need to know when their car is charged and when they need to take it off the charger. Valets need to know that the vehicle's ready for, you know, to be unplugged and moved somewhere else, and so forth. So connectivity is definitely an important consideration, but we're not alone.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I think we, you know, some of the installations we use, you know, for the LPR-based enforcement, we use cellular modem as a backup, you know, connectivity. I think it's really just a matter of, you know, how we engineer, how we design the overall architecture at the get-go. It needs to be part of the overall original design, as opposed to kind of a last-minute patch. You know, things don't work out. So pre-planning, I think, is very important. The technology itself is not rocket science, right? So I think it's just a matter of making sure that we understand what we have, and, you know, when something fails, and what is the backup. Yeah, so I think there's really no magic to that other than just careful planning ahead of time, and then just monitor either through data or other, you know, type of proactive alerts, just make sure that you know, connectivity remains solid. Yeah, but I think you know, there's best practice out there how to do that, and yeah, but I think it's a good question, but, you know, I think that we just had to plan it out early on. So.
Eamon, next time I want to be on a panel where everyone disagrees on something. we're way too agreeable on this.
Yeah, it's more fun, right?
Wonderful. So Eamon, I know we're at the time mark. I understand there may be additional questions. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to circulate the questions with panelists and then get back to the audience after this. Eamon, we'll let you wrap it up here. I just wanted to, again, say thank you to our panelists one more time. This is one of the most, from an information intensity perspective, the most amazing panel session I've hosted. So really, I think that's one part, a reflection of how much of thought leadership and wisdom our panelists have here when it comes to this post-pandemic world in the industry with technologies. On the other hand, it's also a reflection of how much has happened, how much has changed, and how many new things are coming up. I think the time ahead of us is extremely exciting. So again, thank you all panelists. Look forward to the next one. And thanks to all the audience for joining us today. And Eamon, to you.
Well, let me add my thanks as well, Wayne, to you, Dan, Jack, and Jeff. Fantastic discussion, really enjoyed it. I want to thank the audience for joining us, and I want to remind you that we do have another webinar program coming up next month. It's on campus master planning from hospitals to universities. And again, it's another COVID-related program, looking at how COVID has changed that. That's on July 14th at 1 p.m. Of course, you can look on the NPA website to get a full list of all the webinars that we're planning for the rest of the year. And of course, join us on Fridays at 11 for our Coffee Talk series. And absolutely join us in Las Vegas in September for the NPA Expo. It's going to be fantastic, and it'll be our first opportunity for us all to get together face to face, which is, even though these virtual things are good, something happens when people get together face to face. So thank you for that, and have a good day.